Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us once again on Dojo Live. Today, Wednesday, the 29th of May, 2019, where we basically talk about the future directly from those creating it. My name is Kim Lantis, broadcasting live from one of Nearsoft offices in Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico. Joining me today, as you've already seen, is Tulio Sargusa as well as Carlos Ponce. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey, so today we're going to be discussing adaptable technology for language services. And here to tell us more about that are David Rhodes, VP of Innovations, and Ken Anders, COO, from Acorby. So welcome to Dojo Live, guys.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Ken.
Perfect. So to go ahead and get us started, I'll go with you, David. Why don't you please share a bit about yourself as well as your background?
Sure. David Rhodes, grew up in Arizona, and I'm a sign language interpreter by training. Did that for the first 20 years of my career. After that, I got into technology, worked in video interpreting, started a company after finishing my graduate degree, and then worked with language companies where we provided a software as a service technology to allow them to use video remote interpreting. So they could deliver video interpreting services to their clients, and this was about 10 years ago. So we were one of the first movers to have a SaaS product in the market, and I met Acorby at that time, and there was a lot of really good energy between the two, my company and Acorby, and so we ended up turning it into something a little more permanent.
Perfect. Thank you. Very exciting. And then for you, Ken, please tell us a bit about your background.
Sure. Like David, I've been in technology pretty much my whole career, which I'm not going to tell you how many years that is, but it's suffice it to say a very long time. I came into the language services industry back in 1997 and worked in the language services industry to provide remote technology-based interpretation services, translation services, and I went out of the industry for a little while. Well, I saw what Acorby was doing, was approached by the owners of Acorby. They pursued me for a little while, and I got back into the industry, and that's why I'm here.
He played hard to get, but they made an offer he couldn't refuse.
Very, very good. For those of you who are listening to us and not watching us, he did a very good impression of the Godfather. Right? So, all right, perfect. So let's talk a little bit about that tagline. And I think you developed it a little bit as your backgrounds are very much involved in this. But as we get started, could we just separate this out a little bit for those folks who might not be familiar with either the term adaptable technology or what language services are in particular? So could you kind of expand on those two things and then ultimately tell us what Acorby's role is in both?
Well, sure. Let's talk a little bit about language services. In the world today, the world structure, everybody's getting closer. As you probably are aware, there's language spoken all over the world, different languages, and quite a few of them here in the United States, as well as other countries. What language services does is provides the bridge of communications between different languages. They do it either through interpretation, which is the spoken word,
right,
or they do it through translation, which is the written word.
Okay.
Where Acorby fits into that sphere is Acorby provides all language services within that sphere, and we enhance it by using technology-based systems.
Yeah, and I think to go on with the adaptable technology and what that means in regards to what Acorby is doing is to understand what adaptable technologies are. It's easy to start with what adaptable technologies aren't. And if you look at the history of technology as it is, you used to have a monolith of a program that would do one thing. Right. And as technology has evolved, the solutions that are built into or inherent in any given set of technologies or set of solutions has now become so multifaceted. Now you have a tool like the Acorby Adapt environment that does a variety of things in addition to just translation, access to translation services, video services, telephonic interpreting services, scheduling services. So all of those things are now really on par with what you see in the field, where one technology can do a whole suite of services and bring them to the client. So instead of the client having to go out and seek multiple technologies to do the same thing.
Great, thank you, and you answered all three of those questions very, very well. So, is there anything in particular that makes Acorby's tool different from other tools out there, or is that it that it's a one-stop shop? in a
That
sense?
is part of it. In the industry itself, most language services companies out there provide one or two services, and they specialize. At Corby, we offer all language services.
Mm-hmm.
And we not only offer language services, we offer multilingual staffing, which is not a technology-based solution, but it is another component of the language services industry.
Seriously.
So as a company, Corby is somewhat unique in that we do offer a full range of services.
Very good. And congratulations for that. I wonder, I want to go back to this idea of the need here. As we all know, like globalization is here to stay. There's no going backwards. But I think that perhaps we're in a, a time politically and socially and otherwise that there seems to be this. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, that there can be this sort of resistance. So, how do you guys as a company go about increasing this idea of sensibility to the need, the idea to develop empathy, and this want and desire within companies to essentially cross barriers and not only for the world's sake, but obviously for the company's sake as well? How do you go about helping people make that decision?
It's really kind of it's a two-prong approach, because a lot of that is being pulled from the market, where the people that we're servicing, the organizations that we work with, they realize the value that comes in the non-tangible, building human connections. That's one of our big core values here for me. So when you're working with an organization, particularly in healthcare, where they know the value of human touch, human engagement, the personal relationships that go into it, it makes that teaching process a heck of a lot easier than if you're trying to knock down doors and change the entire paradigm of an industry. Fortunately, we're in a place in an industry where we're working with peers in this industry where we're all seeking the same thing, which is to foster connections. It's how we go about doing that, and I think the attention to the human component that goes into that really determines how successful we're going to be at it versus our competitors. If there's anything you tag to that.
No, you said that pretty well.
I love it. That's really beautiful. One of the things that you mentioned is that your background is sign language, right?
Yeah.
So has a Corby incorporated that into their services at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do have a wide breadth of ASL interpreters that are working across the United States and delivering services on site as well as over video. And that was what I came here to assist with. I joined a Corby to help be a part of building the infrastructure and the technology that supports those services.
Very good. So what might the experience of that be like? Like, what could you walk us through perhaps any one of your services? What are the touch points?
Let's look at it from a video perspective.
Sure.
David can actually act as the interpreter right here while I'm speaking to you. So if I was telling you a little bit about a Corby, this is how I would be speaking to you. So having a conversation, he's signing what I'm saying to the individual looking at the screen.
That's awesome. So I have a question here. Obviously, you can tell who the head of our communication is. She's got awesome questions. I will not stop her, but I do have a question. Who are your primary clients, and what role are you playing, for example, with accessibility compliance for companies that do business with the government, for example, that have to have these kind of capabilities? Can you share a little bit about what clients you're serving and what role you're playing in that space, if any?
It's a great question. We service all levels of clients, everything from finance, administration to healthcare. Healthcare probably fits more into line with what you're discussing, because healthcare, according to Title VI regulations, CMS regulations, Medicare, Medicaid criteria, has to comply, has to provide interpretation services. So there's a certain level that they have to provide those with, and we ensure in our delivery of the services that we meet those requirements.
How is adoption coming along? Is this something that companies are proactively engaging in? What are you seeing? Are you seeing resistance, or what's your experience so far?
You see both. It depends on really the culture that we're working with and the organizations we're penetrating into. The level of adoption is directly related back to that human component. focus on the human experience with the services that we're providing, right? If they're looking to just check a box for compliance, then they'll adopt a minimum level of services that we provide. But if they're looking to really enhance and elevate the interaction with the members and the people that they're servicing, that's when you start seeing additional services being consumed and more time being devoted towards training, towards awareness and cultural awareness and things like that, all of which we do our best to assist with.
Sounds like just doing the basic would be very short-sighted, considering there's, I think, something like a billion handicapped people in the world. How many of those, I don't know if you've done the math, I'm pretty sure you've done some research. How many of those are in your target demographic in terms of your ability or for your clients to better serve the needs of those individuals?
Well, keep in mind when you talk about disabled individuals, that's really not our focus. Our focus is providing a communications bridge between individuals who do not speak the core language being spoken wherever that happens to be, whether it's within a company or within healthcare, etc. So it's not a disabled situation. However, we do get involved in some of that. We actually conform to Americans with Disability Act. We provide Braille translation services. So there is some of that going on, but that's not our core function.
As well as CART services for latent deaf adults who don't know sign language but have hearing impairments. The whole suite.
Glad we clarified that.
Yeah. So I'm also curious, like, where do you see most of the exchange coming from with the customers that you service? Is it external facing? When they have to deal with their own business partners or clients or things like that? Or do you have a lot of internal elements as well, like where I have employees who speak a different language, like you had just mentioned?
Both, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely both, and we've seen growth in both. We provide training and learning services, and we've seen a pretty expansive growth internally in large corporations who need to be able to communicate HR function and policies to their employees who may not have a firm grasp of English.
Okay. So when you say training services, I'm assuming that's more of how to better communicate needs, not necessarily language training, right? So it's not language teaching so much as tools that you could use as a company to better communicate with your employees.
Correct. Think about it this way. If you are an HR director within a company and you have to be able to explain policy and structure to your employees, and they do not have a firm grasp of English, you need not only interpretation services, you also need translation services to make your employee manuals conform, etc.
All right, perfect. You had also mentioned the idea of culture, right? Because I think a lot of times we confuse, it's natural to confuse language with culture. Language is an element of culture, right? And I believe you mentioned culture training. I myself am kind of familiar with Aaron Meyer's book, right, of the culture map. Are you guys familiar with those elements, or how do you go about incorporating and teaching cross-cultural elements, not just language?
Well, a lot of it is with sensitivity of jobs, gender selection, for example, with an interpreter, depending on where you're working, especially in the healthcare space, which is one of our larger, our primary focus is for a lot of our video interpretations. Providing a male interpreter to a female, appointment, for example, may work for American Sign Language. It's not necessarily a problem. It might not be the first choice, but if you're now looking at the Hispanic or Arabic cultures, that's a no-no. So there's a lot of client education that we get involved with, working with these clients and helping them help themselves and get out of their own way when they're not aware of these discrepancies and the nuances when you're assigning interpreters. Beyond that, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, Kim insisted I read that book. I gave a keynote at a developers conference in Russia last month, and you need to read this book. I read that book, and it was really useful, actually, because it really painted a picture of different cultures, and I can adapt my speech based on those.
Right. It's jewels.
The question is, how do you adapt based on cultural? I mean, there's a way you could deliver something where you can translate it, but it doesn't necessarily capture the tone or the intention or the approach that is appropriate for those cultural differences. How do you do that? Is that something you struggle with, or you're...
I mean, that's a really good question, because it's a lot like, if you equate it to something like art or cooking, if you have a tool, you have a panini press, maybe that's a terrible example, you have a paring knife, right? It's how do you leverage that tool given the situation where you're facing, a problem that would be appropriate for that tool? Is it a paring knife that works, or is it a butcher's knife? Whatever, they both cut, right? And with culture and identifying the variances that happen within a culture, between cultures, or between American culture and a foreign culture, having it's ultimately driven by the experiences that you've had leveraging those tools in the past and working with other professionals that really shape your knowledge on how to best utilize those tools. Geert Hofstede is another one who's really a pioneer in the field when he talks about language variances and the different aspects of those cultures. And that's one I always refer to when you start talking to somebody and what is their comfort with uncertainty? What is their comfort with me as an authority figure, given my gender? What if it's a woman? How does that all factor in? So.
And it's different when you're using interpretation because you're generally in video or in a face-to-face environment. You are face-to-face.
Right.
So you can read body language, you can read format, you can determine a situation, the best way to approach that. And that's something that we promote. In translation services, there's a term called localization. Localization is not only from adapting software to various languages, but it's also localizing it to the region where it's going to be used.
Right.
So there are cultural aspects to that as well.
Right. It's something that we come across here. So Nearsoft is located in Mexico. We actually have 3 offices. But I noticed this now as a mother, right? I'm a 5. You're right. I'm sorry. We've got San Luis Potosí and Merida coming up there, the smaller little seedlings. 5 now. But as a mother, right, I've always been a huge Pixar fan, cartoons. I have no shame. I'm 37 years old. I still love cartoons. But when you go to the movie theaters here, right, of course, the movies that are meant for younger audience are all dubbed, right? You can go to the movies and subtitles and all that. But it's funny because I noticed that sometimes the jokes and things when you watch them in English, they fall really flat. Right? Or you hear this joke that's been translated and you're like, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. But it's something that over the years they've been getting better and better and better, right, at making these jokes exactly that local. And I think even I was having a conversation with someone about 2 weeks ago where they were talking about cartoon translations when they were a child growing up in Mexico versus what's happening now. 20 years ago, it would be this Spanish language for all of Latin America. And there were certain references to I don't know, the name of a sandwich that nobody even calls a sandwich that, and we don't even know what you're talking about, where they still have to be stuck in this divine, figuring it out due to the context rather than the word itself.
I mean, we have that issue right here in the States. Some people say sandwich, hero, hoagie. I mean, it depends where you're saying, right?
Foot long, Subway.
Very true. Very true. Soda, pop.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So that's okay. So I'm a pop drinker. I was right a pop drinker coming from Montana. It's since been pounded out of me, and I refer to it as soda. So what do you guys? Is it soda? Is it pop? Is it Coke? Tulio, what is it?
I was Minnesota, and we were Minnesota. We were pop, and then moved to Arizona. And it's soda.
It's soda.
Right.
Where was it pop? Where were you when it was
Minnesota?
Minnesota?
Minnesota, yeah.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
I've been, ever since I've been in the States, I've been on the East Coast. So it was always soda for me, but it remained.
Unless you go down south, right, and then it's all Coke. Even if it's Pepsi, it's Coke. Right?
And you see the same, you see the same variance with language, and especially sign language. Everywhere you go across the United States, you're going to have regional dialects for ASL.
I am so embarrassed to admit that I was ignorant to that fact until just a few years ago. I just had this ignorant belief that sign language is this universal language, and it's so stupid. When I think about it, why would it be?
That only applies when you're giving the finger.
There you go.
I mean, you're not alone. You're not alone. For years, to understand that sign language itself is multiple languages. You have
so many
sign language for every country and dialects within those countries.
Right.
It's insane. So going back to this idea of experience that you had talked about when we were coming on this idea of culture, I wanted to ask about the experience of your customers, your clients. How do you guys take into consideration at Acorby feedback from your clients to make improvements on your system?
Directly, we've got a touch we've got touch points with our clients on a regular basis. And you know what they say, if you're not talking to your clients, then somebody else is, right? So especially during the deployment phase, a lot of the time we're able to, you know, beta test or pilot, you know, a deployment within an organization if they're using the full suite of services that we offer. And during that time where there's a lot of hand-holding and a lot of feedback, and that feedback loop goes right back to me and my team, where we're able to implement those changes, provided that we have, you know, business cases outside of this specific client, which is where that's fun for me. I get geeked out when I start looking at the ability for a Corby to adapt and evolve its technologies based on the requirements and the feedback that we get from our users.
Yeah, and we have a fully evolved QA/QC process, which we go back to our customers. We do surveys, we do touch points, we do calls. We find out how our services were received, how well they work, and how many problems we were able to help them resolve. So there is I mean, it's entrenched and ingrained in what we do, because our whole point is creating that compassionate human connection. And if we don't know that we're doing it, we'll just flounder along. So we partner with our customers to make sure that we're providing for their needs.
And there was one of the best examples of that is with one of our clients that's really, really big. I'm not going to say any names. They're huge. They're huge. No, but they had a problem with no-shows. Huge. They had a problem with no-shows, and they came to us.
A problem with what? I'm sorry.
No-shows. They would have a
Okay.
set where we would have an interpreter ready to go on site, or they would schedule even maybe a video session. And they came to us and said, we just don't know how to get a handle on these patients, these members that are not showing for these appointments. And so in brainstorming and discussing what the workflow is for the clinicians and the staff members that happen to be a healthcare client, we came with a solution where we were able to minimize the number of no-shows. I don't even know, you got the numbers on it cut it to a fraction of what it was, where, you know, they would be spending, you know, tens of thousands of dollars a week on appointments that were missed, and we just gutted that. Where it was, for us, it's a hit in revenue, but ultimately it strengthens the relationship because they see us as an ally and a partner in the services that we're delivering.
Right. I think that's we can relate. Go ahead, Tulio.
I was just going to say, a lot of companies struggle with going through proper validation setups like that. So, setting up user groups or client feedback loops, et cetera. I'm curious to just kind of shift a little bit gear into build in-house versus partner. How do you validate additional functionality and features when you get that feedback in determining whether you're going to build that yourself or look for third-party partners? Do you look at those as options, or do you do everything from a proprietary point of view? I'm curious about your strategy, your product strategy.
And that's a great question, because you can't be all things to all people, right? So when we're managing the product, is if we have a solution or an idea that's brought to us, that's the first thing we need to do, is determine what is the feasibility of that actually taking it anywhere. Is it a value to one entity, or is it going to be a value to the entire market? Is it going to be a differentiating aspect, a differentiator for the technology if we add it? And if we did add it, is there somebody that's already done that we can just incorporate with? And then we look at the costs. We look at the internal rate of return on the investment into the technology versus partnering with an organization that might have the features that we're looking for. If it's a bolt-on option that we can incorporate, we do have a lot of strategic partners in the market, especially as it relates to the technology as well as the service delivery. So, and then this guy is always the one that wants to see the numbers.
What can I say?
They say know your numbers, know your business, right? So I'm curious to, can you share with us a little bit about your journey so far? What are some of the key lessons you've learned building this product? Things
you're gonna have to buy the book. You're gonna have to buy the book. I just can't get.
What's the book?
We haven't written it yet.
It's being written. It's in process. Yeah, I'll never forget. I was with a company, I don't know, I think it was 20 plus years ago, and I went to the CEO saying, okay, how do we do this, that, and the other? And the feedback was, we hired you to write the pages of the history. And I said, I got it, I understand. So totally understand. But seriously though, what are some of the key lessons you've learned so far, challenges you've had to overcome? Some of our listeners are startup people, product people that are always curious to learn from other entrepreneurs and other executives who are building products. What are some of the sort of wisdom that you'd like to share along those lines? And now I'll pass it back to Kim because we're coming up on time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lessons. I think one of the most important ones is something David already said. You can't be all things to all people. One of the things we learned through this growth process is you really can't do it all. And if you think you can, you're probably fooling yourself. So you need to be able to focus on what's important. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of different methodologies, different ways to do things. You have to focus on what works and what works well for your clients and your customers. And Corby's gone through many transitions. As a company, started from very humble beginnings with a small translation arm to where we are today, and providing multiple services.
Mhm.
We have found challenges like most businesses, most companies. We find challenges finding talent, the right people. We think we've done a pretty good job of that. Not always perfect. And it's really making sure that you get the right people in the right position. That includes our translators and our interpreters. We are one of the most diverse language service providers in the industry. We focus on, again, that compassionate human connection, making that's not only external, it's internal. And so we make sure we have a family environment, that the people within a Corby want to be at a Corby. It's not a job. It's making sure that you have, because you can replace, you can accept passion, in lieu of talent at times.
Mhm.
If you're really passionate about what you do, you will get it done, and you'll probably get it done better than most. So that's really one of the primary focuses of the company, and some of the lessons we've learned.
And if I could tack on to that, I would just, it starts at the top. If there are any entrepreneurs that are listening, watching this, interested in growing a technology, having the right team is just one thing, but having the right vision, and that's one of the best parts about a Corby, is having a visionary leader like we have in Claudia Mirza. The directions that she's taken this company, I don't think anybody could have seen, 15 years ago. And having the leeway and the support to be able to take risks, to grow the technology is something. You've got to take some lumps to be able to get where you want to end up. And if you get there easily, then God bless, you're lucky. Cash out, run. But
more women in tech leadership. That's what we need.
Yeah, it's great to have the vision, and it's better to have the support of the vision, to the vision that you also want to bring to the table. And I think listening to people who know the industry and help to grow the technology, to focus in on the market where you can and create the value where you're able.
It's really, really beautiful.
Talking to you guys. I'm going to pass it back to Kim to ask.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really a fun section. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Yes, really beautiful. I usually try to wrap it up with some kind of question of, if you could share any, last words of wisdom, what would they be? And I think you guys already did that. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to ask you, personally, what has been one of your greatest accomplishments or the moments that has made you feel most proud your time with a Corby?
No, you go first. I need a minute.
Yeah. Well, coming into a Corby sorry?
No tears, please.
Oh, no. Okay. Can't do
tears are fine. Don't listen to Leo. You can cry.
I'm very blurry. Go ahead. That's a great question. Love to hear the answer.
Helping the company move down the vision path, if you will, I think is one of the things I'm most proud of. I've only been with the Corby a relatively short time, less than a couple of years. But in that time, the movement of the company itself and the direction the company is taking and the success of the company has grown tremendously. And I'm not saying that's because of me. It's because of a great team. And I'm really pleased to be in an environment where no idea is a bad idea. It's the ability to accept ideas, feel them out, see what works, and put it in and execute on it is really what I like here. And it's the environment that I like to foster as well.
Thank you.
You're not going to tag on that?
All right, David, you're up.
I guess I'm trying to think about the most significant accomplishment since I've been at a Corby has to do with the technology, the Adapt platform that we built. Because seeing it from its infancy to where it is today, It's kind of like, being a proud papa, seeing your kid, learn to walk, and then not only learn to walk, but, scoring a goal in a soccer game, and just the evolution of the technology. And I think probably my single proudest moment was when we had a client come to us. We were this is a huge client of ours that we are not the first seat of service providing. We're a third seat service provider for this client. And they had their biggest service provider had a dramatic outage. They were offline, rolled over to their backup. It broke their system. It rolled to us, and we serviced every one of their calls, and our system spiked to volumes that I knew it could handle, but nobody else really knew it could handle in a quarter. And we didn't lose a call. We didn't have any kind of hiccups, no service interruption. It was rock solid, and it crushed it. And that was like
magic moments. Gotta love those magic moments.
I was like, I strutted.
That's really great. So, out of curiosity, did you move up? You're no longer number 3?
I'm pretty sure we did. Yeah, we've had some conversations with them, but they're still under contract, so it's not.
Right.
You know how
so
it is.
Just tick, 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 tick.
Yeah,
just waiting for the time to.
There's still a ring on it, but I know they're looking at us. They like our clues.
That's really awesome. Congratulations. That's a wonderful success story. Very, very exciting. So we unfortunately are to the end of our half hour today, if you can believe it. Yes. So for our viewers and listeners, how might go ahead, Carlos, I'm sorry. Sure.
$11 a.m.
AM, 11 a.m.
That's a different kind of broadcast. Yeah, sorry. Specific.
Perfect. So I just wanted to thank you, David and Ken, for joining us today and telling us about your services at Corby. Very interesting. Congratulations. For our viewers and listeners, if they wanted to know more or get a hold of you, how might they go about doing so?
Well, they can go to our website, which is corby.com.
Okay, that's ACORBI.
AORBI.
AKORBI.
Oh, I said C, didn't I? It is a K. Don't listen to me. AKORBI.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Perfect.
They can go to our website. We also have Facebook and Twitter, and they can communicate with us on there as well.
All right, awesome. And about a compassionate connection with people. So if anybody were to reach out to you guys personally, can they expect an answer?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you so much for your time today, you guys. Tulio, anything else?
Oh, good to go.
All right, perfect.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Julio, Kimberly, Carlos, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
For a second,
Well, have a great day.
I have to go off the air.